Houston. We have a Kraken. Okay, we got to open. We'll probably include some of this. Maybe not, though. Episode 65, Driveline R&D podcast, research and drinks. I'm not going to make the same I'm Alex Caravan joke I made on the first one. Yeah, so we just recorded a whole hour-long podcast. Let's just get it out there in the world. And by record, I mean I didn't hit the record button.
Meaning didn't record.
So me, Langin, and Lindley just talked for an hour straight. It was banging. Got into some sick topics. The world will never know about it, and you guys won't hear about it. But we're going to run it back. So this is actually beer number 2. Driveline R&D podcast, Research and Drinks, episode 65.
I'm Kyle Lindley.
With your hosts.
Pulse product manager. Drinking a Bodhisattva IPA. Same as the last episode, but not same as the ghost episode. I had a Skycracken earlier.
Anthony Brady, director of sports science, primary host of the Driveline R&D podcast. You know, that title can definitely be an even more question after fucking up the recording. No Alex this week. Alex is traveling. He's in Europe for the next 2 weeks. We might try to get him on next week's episode remotely, but
should we call? Yeah. What time is it there? Should we call him and get him on just to say hi, really quick on speaker?
I really don't want to have to do any additional editing on this after we already mess it up. Right. Just to avoid the chance that he's not clothed when we get a hold of him, let's just not. So yeah, we got a guest.
Chris Langin?
First time ever on the podcast.
Very foreign to this place.
Chris Langin.
I will say this. I did sports communication as a major in college. And
what, you majored in it? That's fucking sick.
I know. It didn't really lend a lot of opportunities, so I went into coaching. But I would always be drenching with sweat when I'd go to interview the football coach because I always was convinced I'd forget to record. So I do understand the anxiety. Now, you also didn't execute, which is even more painful, but it happens. Yeah. It happens.
Not my first. Probably won't be my last. There's been a bunch of episodes. We've had episodes. What are you drinking?
Looks like Summer Bliss Tropical Wheat, 5.5%.
Wow, great call. I'm going with the Skycracken.
Really good call.
Same as last episode.
Last recorded one.
I had a Bodhi a couple hours ago, so we're getting back into it.
Not bad.
Oh, a little hazy pale, baby. Yeah, I mean, there was I think in our 3rd episode or something, the video just never recorded and we got only audio. Yeah. Remember that? I fucked that one up. There was one where the audio levels were messed up. Then when we started to do the live thing, we had a couple episodes where there was just no audio for the first couple minutes and people would be slacking us. They'd be like, yo.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that one.
Oh, dude. Was the Eno episode live? Or did we go back and upload that later?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was because I remember being at night. I was at home. I'm pretty sure it was.
The Eno episode was live. I don't quite remember, but the first 10 minutes of the Eno episode weren't recording either. And I remember it started out with Eno telling us a super fire story. Yeah. Do you remember that?
I remember it being a good story. I don't remember this story though.
It was about how, I'm sure he'd be fine with us retelling it because he told it to us while we were recording. But basically in Eno's background, he was in his home office, and in the background there was a picture of I think it was Montezuma or something. Mm-hmm. Some landmark down in South America, which I'm botching this story probably, but that's also where he proposed to his wife. So it was meaningful in some way, but he got that picture by trading it with some guy in college. He traded a bag of weed, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
In college.
I remember the bag of weed.
In college, there was a guy that had some picture. I don't remember what happened, but he got the picture. And again, I'm sure he's totally fine with us retelling it because he literally told it to us while we told him we were live and recording, but I just messed up and I don't think I had audio at the time or something.
Along those lines, since we're re-recording this now, What were you gonna? We had to call Langin back into the office.
We should really show like the Spark Notes version.
Yeah.
5 minutes. I'll tell you what happened. About $25. But you gotta get that separately. Yeah, you gotta get that separately.
Yeah, there were a bunch of really bad jokes. Good conversations though. Probably a couple solid one-liners that if we clipped and like threw on Twitter would play really well. A couple Langanisms
They're all gone, man. They're all gone.
Yeah,
just thrown away.
You can't even deliver.
It's like
in
my
the same
RuneScape
way.
account when I was 10. We got hacked at the YMCA. Yeah. That's what it reminded me of. All
Dude.
that work, all that effort, all those U-logs. They're just gone. Somebody hacks your account, big bully. You got nothing.
Damn, dude. Okay, we gotta lock it in because people don't even know who you are and what you do here. Right now in this podcast, they've just heard Chris Langin. The other one, we did a good job about your intro.
That's true.
Background, what you do. So
sure.
Last
let's
time
start
you were
there.
called Christopher.
Yeah,
all of those things, man.
Which, if I remember correctly, last time you were called Christopher, grandmother.
Yep, Carly Langin. Carly Langin called me Christopher.
Okay.
And when she called me that, I basically ignored it, but gave her a big hug. Yeah. And we went along. But
fair.
Christopher's not the preferred Chris, I would say. Look at make sure that's recorded. You're gonna be looking every 5 minutes. It's just gonna be instinctive.
I see a little red thing.
Like in war, you're just like looking behind yourself. That's what it's gonna be for you here.
PTSD.
But yeah, no, I'm Chris Langin. Been a pitching trainer here for about 2 years now. Did some driveline when I played. Did not have a good career to say the least. Got injured, but took on a lot of the concepts. Kind of always like thought this way. Was really big into sports overall. I talked about how I majored in sports communication, and just kind of naturally started getting into some coaching. I applied to like 60 places. Got a junior college job, thankfully. And then wrote a blog. Opportunity opened up. There's some pitching trainers leaving here in 2019. Got the job in late 2019 and been smooth riding here ever since. Yeah. So,
what was the blog about?
It was about pitching analytics. It's gonna be kind of
precursor for the analytics course.
Right. Just like it was basically, I had gotten certified at that time when you came up here, and it was kind of like recapping. One, it was basically talking about, okay, here are the elements that matter, like velocity, strikeout rate, what you're kind of pursuing, the things you should be like looking for to see if your like pitching staff had success, as opposed to just like ERA. So it started with that, and then it kind of got into, okay, you don't throw hard. Here's what you can do. Maybe you'll never develop, elite velocity. Here's how maybe you can call pitches, getting more breaking balls, changeups, and like 1-0 counts, things like that. That a lot of people in JUCO D2, it's just fastball. So just talking about things like that, when to throw a four seamer, when to throw a sinker, nothing like groundbreaking per se, but it piqued some interest and definitely worked out. So,
how well, you probably don't know this, and I don't think it happened in a public channel or anything, but like I distinctively remember that blog and it getting mentioned. It might have been a group DM or something, but I specifically remember like it getting brought up, just like along the lines of like, we should hire this guy, right? I'm dead serious. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if anyone's told you that. How it kind of went down.
Yeah, no, I've seen some. You can like search your name in Slack. But I do remember. So I roomed with. It's a funny story. We didn't actually tell this last one. I came up for the certification, right? And you come up and whatever. We haven't done it since COVID, right? But you came up and talked to the guys and whatever. And the next day I scheduled a coach's visit. So you come up and you get a 45-minute time slot. Well, I got David Beskey, who has like just started his employment there. And I know a guy named Clay Collison, who's the pitching coach at Augustana now. And Casey Jacobson had been the pitching coach at Augustana previously.
Right.
He worked at Driveline. I messed with Beskey, asked him questions for like 2 hours, just no feel at all, just like ruining Beskey's day.
Way over the 45-minute slot.
way over. They literally created a rule where like it's now 45 minutes. And like if it's minute 50, somebody just comes out and like, hey man, like come on.
Where was this? Where did that go down?
At the old facility.
Yeah.
So it was just like a office hour. Oh,
it was
walking around.
It was built out in Acuity.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh,
like it was like an actual. There was like a whole calendar in Acuity for like visits and stuff and tours, because I think we had to set that up. Not only did we have to have a rule like that, but we did set it up because people would just show up to like 4-3 or 5-4 or whatever, and they'd be like, "Hey, can you show me around?"
Yeah, because we'd always be like, "Oh yeah, if you're a coach and you're interested, just like
And at the time, the main R&D offices were literally in the lobby of 4-3. So like, where we're just doing stuff, and random dads and coaches are showing up, being like, "Hey," and we're just like, "Hey, what? Like, what? Can you show me around?" Like,
I'm
sure.
building a visualization.
Yeah,
here, bro.
I was like, "What, dude?" Trying to process some reports, but okay.
So how was your tour with Besky?
Well, it lasted. I'm no joke. I left at 5 p.m. Got there at 9 a.m. Left at 5 p.m.
No.
Oh, just no feel. Kind of some foreshadowing. No feel at all, which was kind of similar for my first couple months of employment. But yeah, and I talked to Casey for 3 or 4 hours during that time too, and we kind of just talked about like, hey, if you want to like work here. Well, it was like good to just like be there and know I wasn't like super underqualified. Not saying like I deserved the job at the time, but like there was some like, okay, you guys don't actually like, there's not like some witch back here, somebody just like casting stuff on these players. So that was good. We just said, hey, you got to like post, just post something, like make a blog, make something long, get it out there. And so that was pretty fortunate. And another funny thing, during the certification, I had nudged Bill as many times as I could because he had talked about the buckets.
Physically, you've just been like,
yeah, that's what I did. I wouldn't be working here right now, bro. But I had nudged Bill. I was like, basically trying to get him to show me some internal stuff. He's like, hey, we can't do that. And I'm out there at 4 p.m. and Steve Hart is working with a kid doing some step backs and just doing, at the time, I thought it was just like an outrageous cue, some kind of step back, and he's like holding a stick and telling him to step here, and I'm just like, this is insane. And I start talking to him about asking what he's doing, and he gives a detailed explanation that was above my head at that time. And I asked about the buckets, and Steve just grabs his laptop and just shows me all of the information. All the internal information.
Feels like, nah. And Steven's like,
give it to you,
everything. Like, this guy's pretty tight.
The secret sauce.
And so, yeah, I had that visit, kind of made my name somewhat familiar with Driveline, just going to that cert, and then wrote that very long blog. And
so that was like summer 2019, or
a little bit after. It was fall like right after the fall season.
Okay.
Our fall season ended in like late October. There was it was maybe like the second or third formal certification that you guys had.
Yeah,
that's kind of when it went down.
Nice. Yeah, that's fire. That actually ties into something nice that we didn't talk about in the Ghost episode that never happened. But World Pitching Congress was last weekend.
Oh,
I presented on Saturday, and actually one thing, like the main piece of a lot of stuff that I talked about is like the talk was on leveraging biomechanics, but a good portion was telling the story of how buckets and drill scores came to be in 2019. It's kind of a nice topic because it doesn't get into a lot of the stuff that we do now, and shows like, look, here's how we tried to really leverage and make biomechanics data a little more actionable in gym. Very rudimentary system, has like all these flaws, but like we saw pretty good results, and here's what we did. And here's like, a bit of a mindset shift into, really doing stuff with the data more than just like get biomechanics data and that's it. It's like, how can we actually like drive programming and stuff? So it's actually pretty fire. I mean, whack that Steve just showed you everything right away, but it also doesn't matter right now because like we've moved on to such better things. It's also why I feel pretty comfortable talking and presenting about stuff like that and telling more of the story, because I think we're only going to go further. So there's really no problem in like, dishing out some of that secret sauce that we kind of do.
That was also because it was the first taste, I think, of applying the biomechanics data, and like also the test to retest thing. It was like your guys' first like major analysis into what things have changed. Like based on like trainer, based on like athlete type, whatever. And I know all the athletes or all the trainers were super, super excited about. I was in Toronto with Bill, and he was like looking at your analysis, like the original post or whatever about buckets. And he was just the whole time, like I think you dropped it like in the middle of the trip. The whole second half of the trip, Bill was just like on his phone when he wasn't at his computer. And when he was at his computer, he was looking at the bucket stuff.
Yeah, dude, it was in the middle of August while I was at NBC. I was in Wichita.
Yeah,
I posted at like 3 a.m. in between our games.
After ripping gas station ice cream.
No, I was like 220.
We don't want to talk about your embarrassing Vermont gas station orders, man.
What does that have to do with anything?
Ben and Jerry's?
Dude, I did one of the funnier like little like Easter eggs in Driveline clips is the video of me throwing live last year when I'm just like I'm trying to get ready for the season and I just go up and I throw and like there's audio in the background of you talking about the total like misconceptions you had of me basically when we lived together in Arizona, right? Because like early on when we got there at the house, you were like, I don't know. I mean, you tell me, right? Because you were saying how when we went to Arizona, the first time
all caught on the camcorder
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
it like
yeah.
has no idea.
I'm trying to
it's
remember the
being
context
recorded.
of this.
well, the first time we like went to the grocery store or something, I think you said you were expecting like, you know, us to all get like pretty decent, like healthy food. And I just went
Just yeah, exactly.
like,
bro.
I
I don't even know if you want to
Yeah,
say
we
what
could-
you
we-
get on
yeah,
this
we could
on
just
this
stop
hot
there.
camera. Yeah, you want to put on a hot mic, what you actually get, bro?
well, it's not what I get every time at the grocery store. Maybe it was just like a stressful week. My car had broke down, right?
Oh yeah, that
You
was
know,
a hell of
stuff
a
was going
hell of a
on.
time.
But in the first grocery store visit, I think other people were getting food. I'm pretty sure I just got like 2 DiGiorno's, a 6-pack of beer, and a family-sized double stuffed golden Oreo or something.
Oh my
And that was like it. And I was like, that's all I need for the.
God. Well, I remember you'd be like the most efficient dude. You just make like a shit ton of ground beef and a ton of vegetables.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
like, I remember you just like stirring it. I didn't like. I obviously I knew of you at the time, but I didn't like know your intricacies that well. And you were just like stirring it up. I'm like, hey, that's pretty interesting. You're like, I'm all about efficiency.
Yeah, 100%.
And then every Sunday, it's just like massive DiGiorno pizza, and literally just like his side is just golden Oreos,
well,
double stuffed golden Oreos.
You gotta diversify, I guess. But yeah, okay. So in the video of like me throwing, you can hear Langin in the background like having a convo with the other pitching trainers about that story, and so because it's clipped out, every other pitch you just hear like golden Oreos, 6-pack of beer, ripping DiGiorno's or something. You know, it's like I'll just go back and see if I can find that tweet. It's just very.
You diced that day, I think, right? Or was that not the?
Yeah,
one
dude.
where you
That was
just-
over here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
there
that
one
was
where, like,
that was it because
Wow.
it was like 2 weeks before stud season. I hadn't thrown at all really or done anything, and Barry, the coach, was like, "You going to be ready for Thursday or whatever it was?" And I was like, "I think so. I don't know. I haven't thrown live." And I just got up, and I remember my first warm up bullet was like 88. And I was like, "All right." Banged out like a 92.6,
Right.
and I was like, I'm gonna be good, Barry. I was like, I think I'm gonna be fine.
To continue on the degenerate Anthony story.
I like the other podcast. We recorded better.
the first, so when I started in, or I guess it was in 2018 before we were full time, Anthony still hadn't had a single like drink yet or a single beer. And he's just, like throughout his whole playing career, he was just like no alcohol, no nothing, super healthy, whatever. And then it's just so,
Goddamn right.
and then like after 2 TJs, and it's just hilarious looking back on that. And he was like super health conscious, whatever, cardio all the time, lifting all the time, and then got hurt twice. But now he just like, crushes DiGiorno pizzas and golden Oreos and doesn't train and goes out and is just ready for stud season after
Amen.
1 live ABs. He goes to Wake Forest and rips a 92 mile an hour heater just like right off the rip, like about to get a pro
Well,
contract.
I mean, without making this go for 30 minutes, the biggest thing with Anthony, like if I were to just like something that's like an outlier trait relative to the average human being, I'd just be like, hey, if you come to Driveline for a week, just like look at how his body changes over like a 2-day period. He seriously gains 8 to 10 pounds in a 2-day period and just looks like a completely different person. And the next day you're like, damn, that looks pretty damn good.
Went for a run last night.
I had 3 hockey games in 5 days.
Yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
what in the world?
It's pretty tough, dude. I've been trying to like weigh myself before training and stuff, and it is just all over the place. I can't figure it out. I swear, something must be happening. It's just like up and down constantly. So.
Anyways, the analytics course.
Oh yeah,
we were talking about that. That's what we did want to talk about. Analytics course. Okay, how did we segue into this last time? Oh, right. Caravan's not here. This episode's a little less technical. You guys gave me some
compliments. You gave me
it's going to be more PG, but also you're pretty technical. Most people probably don't know that or wouldn't assume that. I mean, if they follow you on Twitter, they probably do. In all honesty, I mean, got a lot of little like screenshots of the slide decks with pretty fire analytics.
Also, some really good dating advice.
I mean, that's analytics too, man.
That's right.
That's what dating is, right? When you marry, that's like a very analytical decision. Like
Caravan's long-term play with this podcast is always wanting it to be like a relationship advice. Dating.
That's probably the only thing is you don't want to like admit that live. You know, you don't want to like if you're dating somebody and they're just like happen to get a catch of this, they're like, what in the world? Like,
oh yeah, we've had some close scares on things, but we don't need to get into that. So analytics course,
sure.
Driveline Baseball has a analytics course which you put a few hours of work into.
Oh yeah.
So
sure, yeah. It's a pitching analytics course, nicely priced at $69. And
free if you have
Driveline Plus. Then it's free. Hell of a steal if you ask me, unbiasedly. But basically it's going to go into kind of the basics of getting into analytics. More or less like FIP, XFIP, strikeouts, walks. It'll talk about stability, reliability, descriptive, predictive, reliability within the statistics, kind of what that means, why we weight strikeouts more than, ball and play outcomes, how BABIP is a bit more noisier. And it's just going to kind of give you a segue into, hey, I want to know more about analytics, or I want to like incorporate them as a coach. And the idea is like, it's a way to translate it to that coach who wants to get into that. And that's kind of like the intended audience. It's good review maybe for some more like highly technical guys, but it's not necessarily targeting that audience per se, but very much, somebody who's a intern, an MLB org, something like that, or like really it's towards pitching trainers, pitching coaches, anybody who's looking to incorporate that, get some gain out of it. That's kind of the main intended audience. So
I didn't go
through it. How long is the content?
Yeah, I was about to say.
Oh, it's like 3 hours. Like it's legit.
Content?
Like basically as long as it's pretty close to the foundations, to be honest, or like the pitch design cert. So yeah, and it took me we were telling this story last time, but it took me literally like 500-600 hours, which like the main reason is I didn't know how to code. Hour 590, I found out about our studio, and the last couple lessons flew by.
Wow.
So I literally thought a data scientist. I mean, this kind of shows you like if you don't work at Driveline, when you get into it, all the things you can kind of start to learn that like if I never got into this context, I would have never known. Is like I literally thought data scientists just like went to Excel and just like added up like 150 sheets and they just like went through data on Fangraphs, exported new sheet. And I get our studio. I'm like, I can group this. I can figure, like I can take a fastball and figure out the changeup vertical break separation. That would have taken me 100 hours with Excel, And so while it was a pretty inefficient method, it did eventually like, hey, I kind of figured that out. And the course is, I think, pretty good. So
fire. We'll put a link in as long as this is recording right now, which I'm pretty confident that it is. We'll put a link in the description of all the podcasts so that you can scope that out.
All of them.
Analytics cert.
I'm down to put in all of them.
Oh yeah, I think it's a staple usually, right?
The 10% off like certification courses.
Yeah.
We'll put I'm down to plug Langin's course in every single podcast.
Honestly, you're missing out because if Caravan was here, he would say, all right, first 5 people to get it, I'm paying for out of pocket. To be clear, I'm not saying that. But if you want to, you can, when we put this out, go ahead and quote tweet it and, tag Caravan.
Yes,
I'm sure he'd be down to be a little frugal while he's in Europe.
That's funny. Knowing what you know now about analytics, after going through the course, after being here for a little bit longer.
Sure.
What was your time coaching like outside of, or like before Driveline, leading up to Driveline? And how do you think, would that change at all based on what you know now and, all the knowledge you put together since then?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, people think this is weird or that I'm just like saying something to kind of like market to the other side. Like it's not real, but like if I didn't work at Driveline, I would be like I just like misuse statistics, and I'd probably be too, I'd like weight velocity too high. I'd weight like vertical brake too high. You know what I mean? Like I'd probably actually crept too far on that. Some of our audience exaggerates the way we go about things and thinks that's all we care about. But I think I probably would have told people to throw like 100% sliders, you know, whereas like the game of baseball requires a lot more context. Some things can't be ripped.
Maybe even just like gyro sliders too.
Yeah, like
you'd be taking people that have sweepers and turning them back into gyro sliders.
Sure.
You know,
I'm not even thinking of it. Like that's definitely just stuff I learned here. You know,
right?
But there's so many things, but I think the biggest one is I wouldn't be able to apply enough baseball context to it, because there are some intricacies that just like baseball is a complex game and you can't rip everything through data. That doesn't mean it's like an excuse to be like, oh, I don't have to learn anything, or I don't need to try to quantify things. Like you always should be trying to do that, but there are some things that, the data isn't going to show per se. You know what I mean? While I've been here, even like talking to Dan O'Coin, like he's very big on that. You got to understand the game a little bit. And it's obviously very helpful for then running those analysis, because you think of more things, So I think that'd be the biggest one. But I mean, I've learned an incredible amount that, I mean, even like pitch metrics, I wasn't that great at, before I came. I understood them. I understood what a sinker did. I understood what a four seam did. But to be able to, know within a mile an hour and like 3 inches of horizontal break, like this is where we want to go with the guy at all times, is something I could have never done, or no matter how long I coached, without the resources here. So.
I think that's especially interesting to me, because I feel like my perception is that a lot of us get away from, and we've talked about it a lot. We talked about it last episode. We like end up getting away from the game a little bit. Our training, like, training for velocity, whatever. Sometimes like the changes we make here don't translate to the field, whatever. And I think that's like a general theme. But the fact that like you come here and you say you think you learned more about the game, more about context and everything, is really refreshing, because it would be easy to get like come in and get like flip 100% to the analytical side and be like, this is because we do all this research, whatever, like this is a truth, this is whatever. But you are still like, incorporating and learning more about the context and the actual game.
Sure. And it really is partially just like understanding analytics more too. You know what I mean? Knowing what kind of like understanding noise, understanding causality, sample size, things like that. Like it's kind of weird, but the more I feel like guys understand numbers, or whoever understands numbers, the more like skeptical they are immediately of some like outstanding trends that are quote unquote too good to believe. You know what I mean? So that was one of the biggest things. I remember I'd always bother Dan about like articles on Fangraphs or ask for his input, and he's like, he'd read it and he'd be like, hey, they didn't account for this variable. And like, I took a philosophy class in college too that kind of taught me to think, and hey, you need to use like scientific method, like don't really like, what's your hypothesis? Can we test it? And like just being more strenuous with that. As opposed to just like believing everything that's too good to be true, because you can generally find something later on
for sure,
to falsify something. So
the more you like learn about statistics and analytics, like the more you not only know its strengths but also limitations.
Oh, for sure. That's TLDR of the last 10 minutes is that's the main thing I've learned.
And not just analytics. I mean, that's every field. I think that's the biggest battle in biomechanics right now, as it's like grown in popularity specifically. I'm sure it's the same in any field that's pretty specific and complex, just like pitch design. But specifically on biomechanics, I mean, the more you know, it's more about the limitations and the nuances that come with it, which honestly, that's my biggest fear with the popularization of biomechanics nowadays, is it being used or leveraged incorrectly, and then that creating some kind of like rift or frustration and resentment from the players. A lot of technologies saying that they can do X, not accounting for like all the things that are different. And just like how stuff changes. I mean, I think it's something that as like this baseball technology space really grows, you have multiple technologies that say they measure certain things in different ways. So like classic pitch design example is, TrackMan and Rapsodo, short form and long form, right? Are you inferring movement or measuring movement? Horizontal break on one is very different than horizontal break on the other. Same thing happens in biomechanics. And those discrepancies, I think, can be really frustrating. And also it's unfortunate because it does a disservice to the coach that's really interested. They're like trying to get an understanding of hip shoulder separation or shoulder horizontal abduction or something. This system measures it this way. This system measures it this way. I get a report from these guys. I get a report from these guys. They say different things. And now I'm like confused. I don't understand it. I thought that, this is how it's going to be. I feel like I don't know. That's just like a frustrating thing to run into, right? Sure. I think it's going to be more and more common as like more technologies get out there and, they try to like simplify what's just like not that simple. Right. So that's tough. I was going to say, with kind of along the lines of what Lindley asked, going back to when you were in your coaching role at a JUCO, which JUCO was that?
Marshalltown Community College is in the same conference as Iowa Western.
Okay.
So
like what, because you were already doing semi-progressive stuff then, sure. I guess kind of along the same lines of what Lindley asked. If you go back to then with like knowledge now, is there anything that sticks out that you would like do markedly differently now, if you're in the same role with the knowledge that you have?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing is there's just like a complete omission for command, but I don't know that I would have changed that because so many of those guys, like, this is another thing in coach I think that's interesting. If you're like a JUCO coach, to me, your responsibility is to like, you bring a player in and you're trying to like do what's best for that player's life. And like, if somebody throws 83 and they're committing to my school and their dreams are to play D1 baseball, I feel like I should kind of create a training plan that like allows them to do that. Yeah. So that might mean, sacrificing a little of training economy for command and potentially that hurts their ERA for 1 year. But if they get to throw to that velocity and then they develop the command later, that's their ultimate goal, I mean, command, just complete omission of command, to be honest. Like, and I think that's.
So you're saying when you were there, you were primarily focused on velocity and break.
And I wasn't good at that either. I probably could have put a lot more time into. I mean, I didn't know how to throw a splitter. I thought like there's a lot of things, man. Like, to be honest, there are so many things. But I'll give you a few examples. One, grips are. I'm not going to sit here and like try to force people to learn every single grip, but that can have a massive impact. Like if a guy can't throw a cutter, check your grip arsenal. Like, how good are you at understanding that? How good are you at like trying different cues, like things like that. I only taught a fastball, a slider, changeup, and curveball. Like, and the changeup had the same grip every time. The fastball had the same grip every time. Slider had the same grip every time. Yeah. So things like that. You know what I mean? But definitely command. And I don't know if I would necessarily change it for that context, but certainly if I was in another team context, instead of doing, as you get close to the season, instead of doing a bunch of drills, I'd probably wait. Hey, let's get some time off the mound, more time with the 5-ounce, more time, kind of trying to throw to a spot. And then the biggest thing to me is like, you need to be able to like give them, just like we give radar feedback, whether it's a hybrid B or a velo day, you got to give them some type of feedback with command too. Yeah. You can't just be like, hey, how'd that session go? That was good. I mean, how intentful are those sessions when you have nothing to really measure?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing that we did. Man, I need to try to drum up that presentation. I don't even know. It might've been the summer when you were gone. It might've been summer 2018. I think it was, because it was when I was living with Rob and Jakes, when I like first came back full time.
At Aiden's place?
Yeah. Cody's place. And Rob and Jakes and I mean, yeah, this is way back. We would like carpool sometimes, and we like shoot the shit. And one thing that we were talking about a lot was command, and we did like a really brief mini internal study with guys to where we took 2 groups and we would track without them knowing really, during their like mound blends, basically like moderately high intent mound days, we would track balls and strikes just like qualitatively. Me, Rob, or Jags would be behind them, just like keeping track. And then one group, we would tell them afterward what their strike percentage was. And then the other group, we just didn't tell them anything. And like pretty obviously, as the sessions went, everyone that we gave feedback to in terms of like, hey, just so you know,
right,
you threw 12% strikes today, know, just like stuff like that. Like you threw 3 out of 15 strikes or whatever it was. Just giving them that feedback alone and like, hey, on their next session being like, hey, you threw like, 40% more strikes than you did last time, or like that kind of a thing. I think it's just, they're not even orienting around balls and strikes. At least at the time, they definitely weren't.
Right.
Athletes were not orienting around balls and strikes at all. It was just like throw ball, check radar gun, you know? And so just giving them a little bit of feedback and nudge, not doing any command training, anything else, just like generally trended towards their balls in zone increasing.
Right.
Now, like not the best quantification of command by any means,
sure,
but yeah, right. Just like that feedback aspect, giving them something additional to kind of like orient around.
Right. I think with some of the intended zone stuff too, not just like command in general, but just having better feel for like, okay, how do we combat like, right? If a guy misses by 13.5 inches on their pitches, which for the lack of a better term is like, 30 to 40, a little bit below 40 grade command. You're not going to probably make them 50 grade command in an off season. So how do you game plan that with targeting strategies or pitch selection, things like that? I think that too is another big one that, prior to maybe the past two or 3 years, we didn't necessarily do like a fantastic job of, and certainly I didn't really wait much prior. So I think there's a lot of opportunity too there.
I think that shit's so cool with just like simple tracking like that, like tracking balls and strikes or whatever, because it's free. You can do like even at the high school level, you can change practice plans, you can change training to have specific goals and everything. I just like look back to when I was training. I only played high school baseball, but every like pitching lesson I went to, we were just like, it was just a shotgun. Like I was just going to throw a bullpen, and I was going to throw my fastballs. We didn't have a radar gun. I was going to throw my off speed, and we're going to be like, oh, that was a good one. And then like, honestly, most of the like good or bad that we like labeled the pitches was mostly probably about location. Like if it was a curveball and it was in the right location, it's going to look good.
Right.
So I think all that like simple stuff that's free and can be implemented anywhere is super cool. Yeah. Also, one thing that I noticed that you mentioned in the last one we tried to record as well, but just like multiple times alluding to, we might not be able to like make this change in the time frame that we want. So like how can we get around it, or what's an alternative or whatever? And I think I feel very strongly that that's like an improvement that we can make in biomechanics, like identifying things that, okay, this isn't ideal, but this is also something that is really hard to quote unquote fix and change.
Yeah.
So what's the next best thing? So like if for people who are still successful with this like characteristic, what are the things that they do well that we can maybe like address or whatever to still achieve really good results probably, but not try to continually attack this thing that we might not be able to actually change in a meaningful way.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of like, and I don't think it's kind of people are still trying to figure out command, like, right? Like nobody's, I mean, the velocity, like I'll put it this way. The reason most pitchers don't make the big leagues is because they don't throw hard enough. Like that's not like a novel idea, but like if you were people listening to this, if you're in an office and you have somebody to the left of you, somebody to the right of you, it probably wasn't because the person didn't have bad command that's not in the major leagues, right?
Yeah.
But people are, for the most part, understanding of that now. So to some degree, that competitive
battle is like done.
Right. So to some degree, that competitive advantage is like it's still like the main reason guys aren't getting the levels they want, but the competitive advantage amongst training centers, amongst orgs is gone, whereas the command stuff is still kind of up for debate. So like you're kind of talking about with biomechanics, whether it's maybe they don't have enough time to make the change, or you've got something maybe like the lead leg block that's fairly correlative to ball velocity, but like How practical is it to change it? You know, those are things that are obviously have to be weighted. Like that's most of it. We talked a little bit in the last podcast about like betting, or just like I talked about my history of betting. Long story short, I bet after my playing career was over, and like my friends were always spoke very highly of me, my knowledge of sports, and like obsessed over it. And I thought I was going to be really good at it. Horrible at it. Like just lost a bunch of money. I mean, thankfully I didn't have much money to lose, but just got destroyed. And then the second half of that year, I pretty much went off of kind of like modeling or like looking how people were betting, where the money was going, seeing how the point spread changed, and started to have a lot more success with it that way. Yeah. So that thought process is always in my mind whether you're talking about like command and making modifications or biomechanics and making modifications, like, okay, we've got a problem. What's like the practical solution here? Like just because you have a bad lead leg block, you have 2 months here. Can we fix that? Or like, do we provide just a drill? Do we omit it? Do we sell out for it? Like those are like, that to me is what makes coaching fun. People think it's just like, has a bad block, now you have to fix it. I don't think it's necessarily that black and white, you know? I mean, what if a guy, I mean, he might not be able to block. You know, he might not.
Yeah.
So the point with the command stuff is like, he's got bad command, so like shrink his median miss distance or make him have better command. But it's like your immediate instinct should be how, like, okay, he's got that issue. What strengths can we use to still keep him on the field and still keep him competing, right? And then like, if you don't have any strengths there, that's kind of, to be honest, that's when you just sell out for velo because it's a little bit more trainable, and that's historically 100%. What people have done. But now with the command stuff, you can kind of figure out maybe you could develop a cutter, something that's a little bit easier to put in the zone. Maybe you, shrink the slider shape a little bit. There's some things you can do, throw more fastballs, set up more closer to the middle, stop training to throw front door sinkers if that's not your strength. You know what I mean? Like, and then you just can put that training economy into areas that are more realistic for that pitcher. So that's why I love coaching. And I think those what seems very black and white, like a bad command, train it, is not like that's actually quite complex, and there's a lot of different routes to accomplish that task that I think maybe a lot of people don't think about. You know?
Oh yeah, it's a really interesting constraints problem where you have, especially where we are with the amount of data that we collect initially. As like a person gets here, we get a really accurate picture of where they are right now, and then we can gain an understanding of like where they're trying to go, level they're trying to get to. And then from there, there's all these different options in terms of how do we do it. I guess, do you think that, how often do you think that like athletes' goals, or maybe what they say to you in passing, or like what they want to achieve, is actually, their best bet or like best ticket towards that like success they want to go to? Like everyone's like, well, I want to throw 95, or I want to play at a D1 school or something. It's like, okay, if we're going to do that, we either need like a lot more time, or you to do like, all this stuff. Like here's kind of like me navigating you to what I think is your best, chance at success, like best outcome, kind of like roadmap for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a basic one is like every time a kid comes in, for the most part, it's like, what are your goals? I want to have better command mechanics, and I want to throw harder. And the like one of the first things I say is, okay, you're 86 right now. If you leave here 86 and our biomech system says your mechanics are better, you're going to be happy? No. Right. It's almost never. No. Now, like, would we predict if they got stronger and they just like they just did the proper throwing intensity? Would we predict like that increase in mechanical efficiency would make them throw slower? No. But the point is, there's one thing you're really looking at. Like, you're looking to throw the ball harder. And 100%. Like people who throw hard are almost always bucketed as having good mechanics, and they don't always have good mechanics. If you like look at our system, there are people who have just blown it apart before.
Oh, 100%.
So that's a very important thing to kind of like explain to them, or to think about yourself. If like somebody's got a few mechanical inefficiencies, it's like, well, how strong are they? Like take that into account too, and kind of figure out where do you want to put that training economy into, because getting stronger, I'm telling you, is it's a lot more easier to accomplish than changing your mechanics. Like, that's not a popular thing to say. It's not necessarily something I want to believe as a pitching coach, because I want to have as most impact as possible. But those are the kind of things you have to wait and think about. And again, it's kind of thinking in bets. You know what I mean? Yeah. Thinking in, looking at this and thinking like, all right, how much, like, I really wish we had a Bayesian society where, like, if you believe something, you put a dollar amount on it. You know what I mean? To give you your confidence level. Because it's like, what drills and like what should the focus be for this athlete? most of the time it's like lift a bunch of weights, and like make sure they throw with max intensity. And then you work back from there as they progress more and more, and maybe that dollar amount shrinks, or then you change it to a different focus. But I mean, I just think sometimes a lot of athletes, and to be frank, a lot of coaches, and I kind of understand why it's better for a coach's purpose to feel like they're providing talent or that they matter to weight mechanics more. But I just don't see that in the data. It definitely matters, but I think sometimes having the athlete's best interest is maybe not interfering with your
100%.
thoughts of what they should do so much.
100%. What do you have on the trade-off? So if you were to make a bet on somebody improving their velocity or performance or whatever, and it's somebody with like really good mechanics, but like isn't very strong, versus somebody who is very strong, has a really good body comp,
right?
But like they don't maybe throw super hard, or they have a couple mechanical like changes to make.
Right.
Because I'll start with, I think the bet historically, at least from what I've heard from a lot of people, is that they'll take the guy with the good body. Like they'll take a good body with that, like maybe it doesn't seem like they're reaching the full potential with their body. But I kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts, like which one would you bet on improving their like velocity more or making more changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, you've got to be careful. Like, it's not like an easy thing to predict. Like, I don't know that it's that easy to predict. Like, who will
like
get
the most
better.
common coachism though, of like,
right?
That's like the uber classic, kid throws 90 and 92 at a showcase or something, and he weighs like $170, and then it's just like, oh yeah, ceiling's so high.
Right.
Imagine what happens when he gets in the weight room and throws on 40 pounds, and it's just like, oh yeah.
Right.
What's gonna happen?
Right. Yeah.
He's gonna go from 92 to 102.
Well, and also everybody knows that. You know what I mean? Like for the most part, people like weight that if it's in that case, right?
Right.
And in terms of like an athlete coming here, like I just think the S&C side is more trainable. Like, and I think it's just more higher predictive power. And if you get like stronger, the database is also a little bit easier too. Like it's like you've got like what the four pretty big correlative metrics over there, and like everybody kind of does the same lifting, and it's there's not a lot of deviation in like how it goes about, in my estimation.
100%.
Whereas on the pitching, there's like a lot of like what was the guy trying to do? Was he in a mechanic fit? Was he just throwing is throwing hard? Is trying to just throw the ball hard not a good way to improve mechanics? Like, does anybody know? Like, I don't. Like, is working on your mechanics like if you just work on your mechanics and throw at moderate intensity versus just like trying to throw the ball as hard as possible for a month, what are the odds that your mechanics are going to be better with the other one? Like,
I mean, to kind of shed some internal light on some stuff. I was having a conversation a bit ago just talking about like internally, how we approach training, a lot of our systems right now. I was kind of highlighting how like, HP, our high performance department, I think like does like a really good job of what they do. And they're less reliant on R&D and our work in like sports science and stuff. And like, we do a lot of stuff for the pitching floor. We do a lot of stuff for the hitting floor. It's definitely more skewed towards pitching and hitting compared to HP. And the person I was talking to me asked like, why do you think that is? And I was like, HP is kind of figured out,
right?
It's like, it's a lot easier problem to solve. There's so much out there that we know in terms of like getting an athlete in the weight room, getting them stronger, adding on more weight, taking away weight, whatever it is, right? Pitching, that is a complex like skill problem. There are so many things that go into it beyond just like throwing phases, programming, drills, and mechanics. Then you start to get into pitch design, all the sorts of decisions that go on with like, what do we add to your arsenal? What do we take away? How do we modify it? Then you've also got command, like health, durability, all these things. It's just a more complex problem that I think is a lot harder. So it's just going to require like more R&D and technical like sports science support relative to just like high performance and strength and conditioning is like, it's just more figured out, I guess, So like,
no, I think you worded that really well. I don't really have much else to add. I mean, it's very true. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of questions to ask. There's so much complexity within the game. There's, like at the big league level, when we've got the command data, we've got the stuff data, we've got the velo data, like when guys throw harder, we don't see a difference in their command. Or if they gain better stuff, we don't see it. That's like league wide. When you like average it out, like there's no correlation. But that question's a lot more complex without that selection bias. You know what I mean? So those 100%. Are still things we're trying to figure out. But I mean, I just think with what we know, you've got a minor league team and 70 guys don't throw hard enough, and their true talent level, isn't they're not a prospect. It's probably something to try with them, because if they get worse, it doesn't really affect it. You know what I mean? So you're trying to just get rid of risk aversion there. But, when there are cases where it's like, hey, this guy's 96, pretty decent stuff. Command is like a little bit below average. What do we want to do? Yeah. You got to decide there. Hey, do we sell out for velo? Do we, implement a new pitch? Do we just do command?
Yeah.
Do we try to modify a good breaking ball into a great one? There's a lot of complexity that goes in that, and how you spend that training economy there is, again, it's a much more complex question. Whereas on strength, it's kind of like, there's a little bit less to think about, to be honest.
Yeah,
not to
little less, job, and but. I definitely think it's a little more solid and easier for those guys. Sure. It was nice. Yeah, I mean I was also kind of touching on how at the time, I think right now our systems and what we do with like pitching development is like super complex. So much so that it's almost like hard to really like grasp sometimes and figure out how we continue to do this thing, which is why I was talking about it. But I also think it's just like necessary to be at the forefront there. I do think there are some things, and I'd be interested in your take on this, right? Like what we were talking about with, you have a limited amount of resources or time to kind of like make the change that you want to develop a player. Do you think that there are like, I guess, stuff that we do internally? I mean, we're constantly trying to like solve these fringe cases and find like very marginal gains and returns on stuff, almost going too far. I think that's the only way that we can like stay at the front of this player development curve, is like continually doing that. But, do you think there is a bit of like, we probably don't need to do this like X hours amount of work thing? We're just not seeing like the same returns.
Sure.
And maybe that's too why the fallback is usually on velocity development stuff. Is just like so much easier
to I mean, whenever something's easier to quantify, you just have some certainty there. You know what I mean? And like
that's probably that's actually probably the thing that it comes back to.
And the other thing too is like it's not just like this isn't novel, but like it's not just velocity of the fastball, it's velocity of the breaking ball. Like it goes to everything. And like again, at the big league level, selection bias, but like when guys throw harder, they walk less guys, because they can kind of pitch a little bit differently. So and to be honest, we're still we talked a little bit how like that's a kind of an agreed upon thing, but like over the like 3 years ago, it wasn't necessarily. I don't think like people were thinking that way, and everybody knows that throwing hard is good, but the idea of like training for velocity with a minor league organization and kind of having the thought process that like some of these guys will throw harder, some of them won't, some of them will throw harder and lose command, but some of them will throw harder and have the same command. Like if you have 80 guys, it's worth it to do it with those 80 guys if 5 of them throw harder and have the same command.
Right.
I don't think people quite look at it in that way. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where you're saying like a bunch of things to think about. Like if you've got a big volume of players, sometimes that simplicity is, kind of the way to go. I said this in the last episode. I think the biggest thing, like if I wanted to know something as a coordinator or a trainer, or to try to kind of predict whether or not just some data I would like that I don't currently have when I'm trying to think of pitching development, I just want to know the guy's training history. I want to know, it's not even like weighted balls. It's just like high intensity training. Has he had somebody who like understands pitch metrics? Like, does he understand what's a good pitch? Because if a guy doesn't know what a good slider is, there's a good chance if you alter his pitch, he's going to have a better probability of like obtaining a good metric. So he's never tried it before, right? Whereas you take somebody from like the Rays or the Dodgers and they're into the minor leagues, there's probably a pretty decent chance that organization is smart enough to have like trialed and erred some market inefficiencies on the pitch metric side.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's almost like, I mean, I guess it's like, it's kind of frustrating to see it happen, but it's also the easiest thing to talk about. And I do it pretty often, or I mean, I definitely did a while ago, is like using athlete case studies and examples of like, here's what this guy did to like gain velocity, right? One problem with that, which honestly, I probably pulled back on the amount of stuff that I like talked about and tweeted about like that, because I realized that the baseball community loves and is constantly searching for truisms within the game and within development. Like, this is something that Eno talked about in his talk a bit at the World Pitching Congress, when he was like talking about Stuff Plus, and everyone's kind of like looking for these type of truisms, like, you know, the best pitch you can possibly have in your arsenal, no matter what, is like the sweeper or something, right? Like, that's just not always the case, but the baseball player development community is always looking for these type of truisms. Like, what's the golden metric? What's the golden mechanics thing that you do in pitching? Same with hitting, you know, always kind of looking for just simplifying the equation of player development down to just like one thing of do this, and you're going to succeed. And so,
I mean, that's a bias in life too, right? I mean, we're all wired to want like simple answers. I mean, think about how complex the world is. I mean, we could talk about that for, 50 hours, how complex the world is. Like, that's
a podcast right there.
You know what I mean? So whenever somebody's got a more simplified answer, it's going to be fairly popular, especially if it like is a good story. You know what I mean? We love stories, and like I case studies are fine. It's just like, a lot of times the missing link is like, dude, maybe
that worked for them. It might not work for you.
Yeah, and also we don't even know how much. Like, and this isn't a reason to not provide the information.
100%.
I'm not saying don't provide the information, but we understand causality well enough that like a slight change in how the athlete's foot is on the rubber is probably not immediately responsible for 3 miles an hour.
That's something I've also come around to too, where I was in a spot where I was like, I don't know how comfortable I feel like talking about this, because I'm talking to more and more people, and they're coming up and they're like, oh, I just need to do this thing, right? And it's like, well, it's harder than that, you know?
Right.
I'm sorry that I couldn't express that in the, 10 tweet thread that I put out with 140 characters each. Like, it's just like, it's limited. It's more nuanced than that. Do you think that, I know for sure that athletes are fiending for those truisms.
Oh, sure.
They follow all the content, they want to see it.
Right.
So like, how often, do people show up to the pitcher's line lab and they're already coming in like, I want to do this to my slider.
Right.
I want to do this to my changeup. Here's what I'm trying to do today.
Sure.
How often do you kind of have to roll that back and be like, well, for like, that worked really well for the guy that, you're showing me his video. Like, I want this slider.
Right.
That might not be good for you.
Sure.
Like, let's play to your strengths and go here. Do you have to do that like pretty often in the lab right now?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about I mean, people are aware that like if you can throw a sweeper, that's great. It's just like, I mean, I talked to Caleb Dilbar a little bit when he was up here from the Twins, and we literally just talked about like sharing information. I was like, do you feel like comfortable sharing information? Like your slider got a lot better, things like that. And he's like, yeah, I'll share it. Like, it doesn't mean they can throw my slider. Like, and he's a very good dude. Like, he's great clubhouse guy, etc. But like, that just goes to show if people are willing to share the information, there's probably not secrets there. So a lot of what basically your job as whatever, if you're running a pitch design or something, is to be able to tell where does the athlete's strength play. Like, if it was as simple as teaching everybody a sweeper, I mean, why the hell would we even have a job?
100%.
Like that's not the point. You know what I mean? But it's a nice delicate balance of like, okay, maybe that's the ideal profile, and maybe there's something to be said. Like, we're trying to quantify, we're starting to quantify a lot more things with like grips, cues, all of these things to be able to configure. All right, where would this person primarily, where would their breaker project to be best? And we're trying to figure out things like, okay, if they've thrown 25, is that like, they're not going to have it. They've tried to throw a sweeper 25 times. It's time to move to something different. You know what I mean? So the basic answer, I guess, is it's absurdly case by case. You know what I mean? It's absurdly case by case, but as I've done it more, it's kind of interesting of how I've switched. When I had less confidence running them, it'd be like 3 pitches. If they didn't get it, they can't throw it. And then it's like, I think back now, I'm like, that dude spun at 2,700. I didn't know about these grips. Maybe I screwed him over. You know what I mean? So, but definitely a lot of it is understanding. Same with mechanics too. Just like after I've gotten more information on the athlete, whether it's multiple mocap retests and I kind of get a feel for maybe what he can manipulate it or can't, or I've seen, a couple pitch designs, you start to kind of intuitively gather a better sense, which On the pitcher science side, we're trying to just better quantify it. Show us your process. We quantify the grip, what the cue is. Show us the process, what you did, and we want to basically get it to the point where it's like, if the athlete doesn't get better, it is not ever an inclination of like coaching talent. You know what I mean? And that's nothing against our guys or against me, really. It's just like, that's how we think here. You know what I mean? Like we want to get it to the nth degree so that we can confidently tell the athlete, hey, your best profile for a slider is a cutter, believe it or not, So, that happens a lot. You got to kind of explain case by case. You do that one thing. It's human nature to try everything. I'd encourage athletes to try as much stuff as they can, but it's not guaranteed to work for you.
I think that's like a huge value piece. Obviously that we provide, and also why I feel more confident and comfortable, especially as of late, talking openly a lot more about what we do and how we do it, because people may take some of the stuff, the case studies, the stories that we do, and they might try to pick out those truisms, but at the heart of it, that's not how we approach stuff on a day-to-day basis. We don't just slap the same programming or the same pitch design recommendations or whatever across the board. There's like a lot of intricacies and nuances behind it, because of the access to things that we have in terms of like internal stuff models, internal biomechanics, athlete composite score models, all of that stuff, right? Like we can talk about these case studies for days and people can try to like recreate what we do, maybe like grab some of this stuff, but at the heart of it, it's quantifying the underlying metrics related to performance, and then we can just, throw different things at those problems as we go. We're not telling everyone that comes through the door to throw the same type of pitches, move the same kind of way,
right?
All that stuff, right? I think that's, a while back, I probably thought more and more towards like, oh, this is our secret sauce, but just seeing where people have kind of gone in this space and how hard they lean towards trying to get those truisms, I just feel pretty good about honestly where we're positioned, right? And the results that we consistently put out for athletes, On
the pitch design side, it's kind of just like getting a progression. Like we actually get enough data where it's like somebody comes here, like when I used to run them, it's like, oh, dude's over the top, like gyro slider, top down breaking ball. And now 100%. I'm like, what the hell was I doing? But like, if you look at some stuff, it's like, arm angle is going to, like, if you're up here, it's going to be difficult to induce, side to side movement, things like that. But I don't think it's bad to like eventually get to the point where it's like, hey, you should, like the sweeper is so undervalued that like you should always, with every athlete, regardless of context, if they don't have like major league data or they don't have like absurd command with the pitch, whatever, like try a sweeper, but based off of like the velocity trade-off from the fastball, which currently we just do intuitively, you like move to the next bucket, and it's kind of like data driven in a sense, but it's still at the end of the day, the heart of it is like understanding the variability within each athlete.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. What?
Oh, I thought you had something.
No, I was saying just like experimentation, like,
right,
trial and error. But like if there is something that's super undervalued or whatever.
And I mean, it got to the point with me where I just got like tired of, it's always going to be trial and error, right? But I kind of got tired of like, and I ran like 120 of them or whatever. Like everybody in the departments ran a bunch of them. Kind of got tired of just like trial and erroring it with no data.
Yeah.
It was just like, what if we just tracked all of this, literally every single pitch design, saw what we tried to do with it, and see if we just picked up trends, like, hey, like everybody should try this grip with this slider, like before progressing to like anything different, because we have the most success with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
but it's literally the development of like trying to figure out stuff like buckets and drill scores.
Right.
It was just like, all right, we're seeing these guys come in with these mechanics profiles. They throw harder. These are the main metrics that changed. Okay, we should probably just like, slap those on. But early on, we weren't even like comparing it at that level.
Sure.
Well enough. We weren't doing enough retrospective stuff where we had a large data set of assessments and retests and understood their training history, and we kind of just kept moving forward. We kind of just like kept going. And then it was finally to the point where, Sam was one of the main people who was just like, hey, we need to like leverage this and actually like track changes. Are we doing stuff?
Right.
And are we like implementing changes and seeing results that relate to what we're doing at the scale we're trying to do it at. And so there's a lot of that, identifying the patterns, moving to the next box, like, all right, well, this worked for these guys. Why didn't it work for this guy? Kyle Muller comes in, throws 97, breaks every bucket. Right. Right. Okay, our model of mechanics needs to adjust or kind of like account for these cases. So that's the real data-driven approach. There is going back and kind of like reevaluating ourselves, which we just did not do enough of the time, and we do more so now than ever. I think that's like one of the better parts is how hard on ourselves we are, which also plays into us constantly trying to like ramp up and develop these like complex systems, because we get so stuck sometimes, I think, on the fringe cases where stuff doesn't work out.
Sure.
It's like, oh, well, our model or what we're trying to do here clearly isn't good enough because like these two athletes didn't get better.
Right.
Compared to the other 98,
right.
Which is tough.
Yeah, definitely some like confirmation bias. That's kind of like on the pitch design side. There's just like, if you ran, think of content, man. Like I've worked with 80 athletes here, and like some of them haven't gotten better. I don't tweet about those guys. That's everywhere. But internally, and I'm not just gonna like randomly tweet that out. But internally to like have that be documented. Just gives you way more perspective, and the same thing with the PD side. We didn't document some of the stuff gains until, past year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we have that, we can at least like, cause you're always gonna have some confirmation bias when you like taught a guy a good pitch. And then like, there's always some coaches, not here, but some coaches are like, oh, if the kid got worse, it's his fault,
Right.
And there's a balance of that. That definitely happens sometimes, 100%. But if I train 50 athletes, I could be the worst coach ever. 2 or 3 of them are going to pop. 2 or 3 of them are going to pop. But you're trying to figure out, when I get a big sample, 150, which would kind of be like being in an org where you've got all of these players, which is why I think people do a very poor job of accounting for some of the lower level prospects, right? Because that's the bulk of the guys you're training. And if you can get just like, they're only like 3 ticks away from kind of being close, some of those guys. Yeah. So you kind of want to show validation that like, hey, if we have a big sample of players, what happens? That's what we're trying to do. And it might only be improving the velocity gains by a 1/10 of a mile an hour, stuff plus by 3 points, or command by 0.2 inches. But if you add that up over those players, a couple of them don't gain 0.2, a couple of them gain like 1.6, a couple of them gain like 4 miles an hour. So it's actually worth quite a bit, you know? So it's cool to see that.
I think I mentioned it one of the episodes from a long time ago when we first started talking about the buckets, but we for sure learned more about biomechanics and like a bucketing and drill score type system from athletes that regressed in velocity than we did in the athletes that got better. Because a lot of the athletes that got better kind of just like confirmed biases and theories,
Right.
But the athletes that maybe didn't improve in velocities, that did have like certain mechanical changes going on,
right?
We were able to like, oh,
sure,
we were so focused on this mechanical piece correlating to velocity positively that we hadn't even considered, when velocity goes down, right? How does it like factor in there? That's something too. In a couple of the slides from last weekend when I was talking about buckets, a few plots that when Caravan and I were going through like one of the larger audits, we were looking at on the left side, it's like change in velocity, between sessions, and then change in the metric on the X. And it's not a 50-50, but there are a lot of data points that are under 0, right? Like internally, our average velocity gain over a 6-week session is still positive. It's still good. We're able to like confidently add velocity in the majority of athletes, but there are some that go down. We get a ton, I think, of like theories and rabbit holes that we can kind of chase down, more so on the athletes that like regress in velocity, because we just don't think about that naturally.
Right.
Where we're so keen to like, okay, make this positive change in this metric, see positive change in velocity. But really do think we learn a lot. And all of that goes back to just like having a system in place where it's documented and we can see it. That's really a, data-driven approach, not just, do you have an athlete that comes in throwing 90, train with you for a while, they throw 94 and you like talk about it, right? Like you're doing something, but are you tracking every data point?
Right.
Are you spending as much time trying to figure out why velocity regressed in some athletes as you do on trying to figure out why velocity, like increased in other athletes?
Right.
I think that's like, it's tough too. It takes you gotta let down your guard and be willing to say like, we fucked up here, which again, huge credit to Sam, and what he did when he was like in charge back then. He basically came forward and was just like, look, we are doing a really good job. People come here, they train, they get better, but like we fucked up with these athletes and we're not trying to figure out why enough. We're just so focused on everyone that got better, but like we do let some athletes down.
Right.
And he put a ton of emphasis and like we need to care as much and do like a global data-driven approach on all of the data that we're collecting, not just the guys that get better. Right. I think that was like a pretty big shift into really figuring stuff out.
For sure.
We did here.
A good book, Black Box Thinking. I don't know if you guys have read that, but it's a really good book for just like kind of changing your perception of, I don't want to say like failure, because like everybody's, I win or I learn or whatever. That I'm like, I don't know about that, man. But definitely like you document things. You should have like if somebody whatever's in a pitch design, some guys get better. We almost don't learn that much from that. It's just like confirm. It's just, and a lot of times, if we're honest, guys who get better probably came in. We don't know, like we can't quantify it beforehand, but they were probably projected to get better off of a variety of factors. Poor coaching in the past, poor training, things like that. So when you kind of start to remove yourself from being like the main cause of everything, you can kind of pull things back and start to really figure out, okay, what are we bad at? Why? What scenarios are we like having a bigger failure rate, etc. And like I think setting up things that are documented and like what we tried to pursue in that pitch design session or whatever, we instead of like, oh, kid doesn't throw a better slider, just like, oh yeah, fuck that trainer, like he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. It's like, no, you guys like, there's no difference between any of the trainers for the most part. Like he did the exact thing you guys would, and it's kind of like documenting that. In a sense, it's kind of bringing everybody together and say, hey, like, what'd you try? Let me see that. And then you really just figure out, okay, maybe like there are scenarios, maybe this kid has no more room for growth, and that's depressing and that's not fun to say, but that happens. Sometimes guys are peaked at their breaking ball and it's 81 and it's a gyro. Yeah. And all our job is, we'd love to freaking make it way better, but with as much effort as we can we confirm that we tried everything possible to make it better? And the only way you know that is if you document it. For everybody to see, and then can go back, see the cues, and then adjust for the next session and learn more. And I think that's and if nothing else, maybe instead of doing 6 extra pitch designs with that kid, now we have that documented where we know like, hey, we know that he needs to be a gyro guy a month earlier for the next guy who comes in, and there for a month doing an extra thing of live ABs instead of just like a bunch of pitch designs trying to learn a pitch that isn't possible for them, that we wouldn't know without having a lot of documentation. But at that point, man, documentation to kind of see that
100%.
That'd be valid.
That's like an actual systematic data-driven approach, which honestly, most people probably don't even like understand that's how kind of like meticulous we are internally with that stuff. I mean, that was something we talked about on the last podcast, like, we just focus on velocity or we're the weighted ball guys, but like we're just throwing anything in our toolbox that we can at the problem in front of us and trying to like quantify, where you are, where you want to get to as much as we can. And keeping track of it,
I really don't think of weighted balls when I think of Driveline. Like that I'm probably the only guy who thinks that, but like I had never like really. I always kind of just thought, hey, you're trying to throw hard because the market is really undervaluing this because they think it's like not possible. Yeah. And it's a additional risk for injury. But it's like, what the hell? I threw 87 in college. Like, what the hell was I going to do with my arm when I got injured? Like, what? Seriously, when I'm 25, what the hell do I need it for? To eat a famous potato bowl? Like, there's not, like, I don't get that. That's actually one of my most unpopular takes. I don't get why everybody needs their arm to be healthy after they're done playing.
I think it's a spicy one. Man, I would love to just...
I mean, if you gave a minor leaguer that was 24 in high A, 4 ERA, 91, nothing that suggests a profile up to the big leagues, if you gave them an 85% chance their career's over, Tommy John, but a 15% chance to throw 5 miles an hour harder, that is the easiest decision of all time.
100%.
I'm not saying that's how it works here, but I'm saying that's the thought process that needs to go into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think Driveline that's what I always like saw when I was kind of looking into the early going. I never was like, I'm not on as much as like the aspects of like, oh, do you do plyo velo or do you do like pull downs? Like I definitely look into that now, but that never was what like intrigued me. You know what I mean? It was just like, they're kind of going for something that everybody else is kind of like, that's not, you can't train that.
That's a really spicy take. And one that I've got a lot of gripes with the academic world, especially in applied biomechanics, sports science. Talk about them a lot, but like injury prevention, injury risk, basically any model or paper thing that is like around injury risk is just really, really frustrating to me. I mean, if you look at the amount of articles that are out there on pitching biomechanics, the vast majority are effects of kinematics, kinetics towards like stress, injury risk prevention. I mean, that is the intro. It's like a guaranteed sentence in the intro paragraph of like most papers out there is like Tommy John surgery is on the rise, right. It's a Tommy John epidemic in baseball, all that stuff. Right. And everything is so focused around amount of stress that you experience, trying to limit like previous injury. You build a model that's like focusing on reducing stress, model's going to just tell them to not throw.
Yeah.
Like, and if you, I don't think it's just a take that is very like blunt and in your face to say something like that. But yeah, it's true. I mean, if it was like, hey, you can either stay where you are right now, throw 83 to 85, not really go anywhere in your career, or, I give you this like pill that you take.
Right.
Let's say there's you increase your chance of injury by like 30%, but you're going to be 93, 94, and you're going to get talked to by, like, everyone's going to jump on any opportunity like that, right? Yeah. And I don't think, maybe there are some athletes out there that are like, oh no, I'm going to try to optimize for health and durability.
Right.
Okay.
There's obviously
there are men's leagues that will take, like, 82 in command, I'm sure.
Right. But yeah, no, that's same with the splitter stuff. I put out a little bit about that, like, splitters hurt arms. It's like, okay,
that's a good point too.
Like,
yeah.
It's just like, okay, one, like, there's so many ways to answer that. It's like, one, you don't have, like, the only thing we know for sure is that splitters are like good for some pitchers. Yeah. Like they
throwing anything hurts arms.
Like, yeah, that's the other. You're just, how about we compare it to a baseline? Like, oh, that guy did Driveline and got hurt. It's like, well, if 1,000 people do anything, somebody's going to get hurt. So obviously there's a lot of things we could go into. But and then there's obviously some pitchers where you need to, like, there's a little bit different risk reward there, and you need to like optimize a little bit differently. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're going to eventually have to throw a ball as hard as you can, and you have to kind of train for that, But yeah, the gonna get hurt thing has always just confused me, because all of those minor leaguers are begging for variance. They're all begging for variance. And like, if you're 24, most of the guys I talk to be honest, they're 24 and like they're trying to kind of figure out what to do with their life. Like, and they're coming here is like, I need to get 3 ticks, because if I don't want to be here for 3 more years with the same talent level and just fill a roster spot. You know what I mean? So that aspect has always wildly confused me. You know?
No, it's I would love to hear you give that kind of take in front of just like board of medical people.
I just want to know I just want to know what people are doing with their arms at like 28 when they're not playing baseball. I don't get what is going on that like makes it so necessary. I'm just being honest. Like, what do you do with your arm? It's not like football. I understand. If you if you get a head injury, that's a little different. But
if you look at the possible scenarios in that situation, it's like throw low 80s, career ends, done, or try to shoot for something, give it your best shot. Worst case scenario, maybe let's say increased chance of injury risk. You have a catastrophic injury, playing career is still over. So like as far as your,
Right.
you know, where it comes, or as far as like baseball goes, right? The end point's the same.
Right.
Nothing's really changing there. At least you like maybe gave it a better shot. But yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, you know, you're 28, 30. You've got a partially damaged UCL that doesn't let you throw an 80-mile-an-hour fastball anymore. But are there like serious like life complications with that? Like, I honestly don't know.
Well, obviously, my take is like I don't either, because if there unless there is somebody's got some data on like, hey, if you have TJ, you got like 12 less years on your life, then like maybe I'll definitely change my mind. But
I hope not.
You might have a lot of years.
You got like 10 years left, dude.
Might have just shaved 24 years off my life with that statement, dude. What the hell? Holy shit.
Langin, thanks for podcast number 2.
No problem.
Yeah, man. I think it's recording.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll run it back for a third time. Fingers deep on this thing. All right, that was episode 65.
Yeah, I think so.
Episode 65. Driveline R&D podcast. Hopefully back again next week. Still maybe no Caravan, but yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Peace.
Bye.